Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we have a new life story. Let's begin.
She'll handle it all. That's what my father said, eyes fixed not on me, but on the floor, like the weight of his decision was too heavy to meet my gaze. No one in the room flinched. Not my mother, who once sobbed in my arms over a bounced check she was too embarrassed to tell Dad about. Not my younger brother, who had maxed out 3 credit cards on some half-baked crypto venture I'd helped him escape without consequence. Not even my aunt, who glanced at me over her wine glass with the same vacant expression she wore at every family gathering. No one looked at me. No one even waited for my reaction, because to them, my agreement was automatic. My silence? Guaranteed. But they didn't know. I'd been preparing for this moment long before they thought they needed me. While they counted on my loyalty, I was counting the costs. While they leaned back into the cushion of my reliability, I was quietly slashing every rope that tethered me to their comfort. They thought I'd walk away empty. They had no idea I'd already reclaimed the only thing that mattered, myself. Once, I was the good daughter. I was the one who never forgot to call on birthdays, who sent flowers when someone's dog passed away, who brought dessert to every holiday meal and left with nothing but dishes to wash. I was the one who paid just this once, over and over again. At 23, I delayed grad school to help Dad after his stroke. At 28, I co-signed for Zach's second car after the first got repossessed. At 31, I handed over $2,000 for roof repairs my parents said their insurance didn't cover. Not once did I see a bill. Not once did I get paid back. But every time, I was thanked with the same tired phrase. "You're the strong one, Mira. Our rock. We're so lucky to have you." I wasn't a rock. I was a crumbling wall, patched up with obligations and good intentions. No one asked how I was holding up. No one noticed when I stopped sending pictures from work trips. No one questioned why I always came alone to Thanksgiving or why I barely touched my wine anymore. I was tired. Not from work, not from life, from them. From the constant, quiet expectation that I would absorb every mistake, every emergency, every emotional collapse. I was the net, the backup plan, the one they called when things fell apart, never when things were good. And I accepted it. For years I did. Because I believed love meant saying yes. Because I believed if I was dependable, I'd be valued. Because I believed if I just held on long enough, they would finally see me. Not as a wallet, not as a fixer, but as a daughter. But I was wrong. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like a faucet dripping behind the wall until the paint bubbles and you realize something's been broken far longer than you thought. It started when I moved my emergency fund to a new account, one only I could access. Then I changed the password to our old family shared calendar. Then I stopped offering to help out when Mom called with her weekly sigh about bills. I didn't make a scene. I just stopped raising my hand. And the silence that followed was telling. The "we miss you" texts slowed. The surprise check-ins faded. The holiday group chats, where I was always the one coordinating, disappeared altogether. I hadn't withdrawn. I just stopped giving. And that made me dangerous. The call came on a Wednesday night. "Hey, sweetie," Mom said, far too chipper for someone who never called after dark. "Call us when you get a minute, okay? Nothing urgent. We just need to chat about something." Something. That word again. A few days later, Zach sent a message. "You coming to dinner Sunday? We've got a few things to run by you." Run by me. They never ran anything by me. They assigned me. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled the beige binder from under my kitchen sink, the one labeled "Personal Records" in tiny, neat font. Inside, Bank statements, legal documents, a spreadsheet I'd started a year ago titled Unrecurrent Contributions. It wasn't meant for them, it was for me. Line after line. $4,300, Zach's tuition shortfall. $1,200, Mom's dental procedure. $5,000, an emergency I was never told the details of. Total, $84,950. Every penny had gone out quietly. Not one had come back. I stared at the final number, then slowly closed the binder like it was a book I'd just finished, one with no sequel. 2 days later, Dad called. We're having a little family meeting on Sunday. After dinner. Just us. Nothing formal. He paused. We'd really like you there. They had never called it a meeting before. We didn't have family meetings. We had silences, passive jabs, holidays glossed over with wine and weather updates. If they were calling it a meeting now, that meant it was serious. That meant they had a plan. I had a choice. Walk in blind like always, or walk in ready. I chose neither. I walked in clear. Sunday came, I showed up with clean hair, neutral lipstick, a blank notebook, and a stillness that wasn't performance. It was exhaustion weaponized. Mom served roast chicken, like always. Zach drank straight from a can. Dad wore his flannel button down, the one he used to fix the lawnmower in when I was 7. We chatted about the neighbor's new puppy, about traffic, about a scratch on Zach's bumper. But the longer they pretended nothing was happening, the more obvious it became they were stalling. Then, Dad cleared his throat. Mom folded her hands. Zach sat back like he was preparing for a pitch meeting. Mira, Dad began, your brother's hit a rough patch. A lawsuit. It's manageable, but the deadline's close. How much? I asked. Not because I planned to help, but because I wanted to hear them say it. 200, Zach said. I've got about 20. I need the rest within the month, or I'm in serious trouble. Mom rushed in. We've talked it through, and we think the best solution, just until he's stable, is for you to help cover it. She smiled like it was a reasonable suggestion, like they were asking me to grab milk on my way home. And then Dad said it. With no hesitation, no room for question, Mira can pay everything. Not should, not could, will. That was the moment. Not the number, not the setup, the sentence. It was a key in a lock I hadn't realized I'd been holding. They weren't asking. They weren't hoping. They were expecting, like always. Only this time, I wasn't playing along. Not the kind that begged for clarification, not the kind that came before a storm, the kind that settles into your skin like cold water. Final, clear, undeniable. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me across the dinner table, waiting for me to nod, to soften, to step into the role I had played for so long. I didn't. Instead, I placed my napkin gently on the table, folded it once, then twice, and said, no. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply the truth. Zach scoffed. What do you mean, no? He laughed, like I'd told a bad joke. This isn't like the time I needed rent. This is serious. I know it is, I replied. Mom leaned forward. Sweetheart, this is your brother's future. We're not asking for a gift. We'll work out repayment terms. It's just that the deadline? I said no. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get defensive. Because there was nothing to defend. They hadn't come to ask. They had come to inform, and I had simply declined. Dad was the last to speak. His tone had changed. Less polite, more managerial. You're in a position to help. It's not like we're asking you to choose between your own survival and his. He paused. Or are you not as stable as you seem? There it was, the weaponized doubt. The implication that my refusal could only mean failure, not autonomy, not boundaries, but weakness. I could have listed my savings, my investments, the promotion I quietly earned 6 months ago that bumped my salary into 6 figures. I could have reminded them that I paid off my student loans early, that I owned my part outright, that I hadn't asked anyone for a single thing in over a decade. But I didn't, because that would have made it about proving something, and I had nothing left to prove. I'm sorry, I said finally. I really am, but I won't fix this. I can't. Zach stood up so fast, his chair scraped the floor. You can't or you won't, he snapped. Does it matter? It does to me. Then it's won't. He laughed bitterly. Unbelievable. Mom's eyes welled with tears, not out of heartbreak, but disbelief. This isn't you, Mira. You've always come through. You always take care of us. I looked at her then, really looked at her. At the woman who used to cradle me in thunderstorms. The woman who taught me how to write thank you notes and braid my hair. The woman who now sat across from me, unable to see who I had become because she only wanted who I used to be. I've always come through, I said quietly. That's the problem. I stood up, calm and whole. No tremble, no rage. Just the final turn of a page I'd been rereading for far too long. I'm leaving now, I said. I hope you figure things out. I really do. Dad didn't speak. Zach cursed under his breath. Mom reached out, more reflex than intent. But I didn't touch her hand. I didn't hug goodbye. I didn't look back. Because that would have meant I still believed something could change. And I didn't. Not anymore. The cold air outside hit me like clarity. It was dark, quiet. My breath rose in clouds as I walked to the car I had paid for in full and maintained myself. I got in, turned the key, sat still. The dam didn't break. There were no tears. There was only this astonishing lightness. Not joy, not sadness, relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had told my family, you can no longer use me as a safety net. And the world hadn't ended. They were still sitting in that house, probably shocked, maybe angry, but I was sitting in mine, free. The next day, I blocked the group chat, muted calls from Zach, silenced the ringtone for Mom and Dad. Not out of cruelty, but protection. I had spent years absorbing their panic, their chaos, their inability to plan ahead. And they had mistaken my reliability for consent. No more.
I didn't owe anyone an explanation for my piece. Weeks passed, then a month. They stopped trying to call. I thought it would hurt. It didn't. It felt like finally having room to breathe, to listen to myself, to do things without calculating whether it would inconvenience someone else. I repainted my apartment, took long walks after work, picked up the cello again, something I hadn't touched since college. I remembered how to enjoy silence. One evening, while sorting old receipts, I found the envelope I'd used to collect IOUs over the years, mental and literal. I emptied it out on the table. Medical bills, co-signed contracts, scanned Venmo transactions, a letter from Zach I'd saved where he thanked me for being the only reason I'm still afloat. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt data, proof of who I had been, evidence of what I had survived. I didn't throw the envelope away. I filed it under a new folder. Lessons. A few days later, a message arrived in my inbox. Not from my family, from a woman I had met briefly at a networking event last year. She ran a community grant program and had remembered my interest in creating financial literacy workshops for young women. Her email was simple. "We just got approved for our next round of funding. Would you be open to leading the pilot program?" I stared at the screen. An invitation, not a demand. A chance to use what I had learned, not to rescue, but to equip. I smiled, replied, "Yes, I'd love to." A small room in the back of a local library. Foldable chairs, fluorescent lights, a projector that whined louder than it worked. But they came. 3 high school seniors, 2 young moms, and a woman in her 40s who confessed she'd never written a budget in her life. "I was raised to think the man should handle it," she said during introductions. "Turns out the man left. So here I am." Everyone laughed. Nervously. But they stayed. I didn't think I'd be good at teaching. I worried I'd sound too technical or too guarded, that I'd make the same mistake my father always made, assuming other people needed to be corrected instead of understood. But something happened once I started talking. I didn't just explain interest rates and debt snowballs. I told stories. My stories. I talked about co-signing for things I shouldn't have, about mistaking help for loyalty, about the time I borrowed against my savings to bail someone out and spent 3 years rebuilding what I'd lost. And their eyes didn't glaze over. They leaned in. Each week, the group grew. One of the high schoolers brought her cousin. The woman who'd never budgeted told her coworker. The librarian asked if we'd do a second session for Spanish-speaking attendees. I said yes to everything, not out of obligation, but because I finally understood the difference between being used and being useful. Being used drained me. Being useful nourished me. I had lived my whole life thinking they were the same thing, but they weren't. Around the 5th session, I noticed a familiar name on the attendance sheet. Aaron Caldwell. It took me a moment to place it. Then I remembered. My cousin. The same one who ghosted me after I stopped loaning her money for urgent travel. The same one who once posted on Facebook that families should never let money change their hearts. I debated pretending I hadn't noticed, but when she walked in, our eyes met, and she froze. "Didn't realize you were running this," she said, half defensive. "I am. I replied simply, "You're still welcome." She didn't say anything for a moment, then sat in the back row. Didn't need to, because at the end, she came up, eyes slightly red. "She didn't understand what you were doing," she said, "back then, when you pulled away. I thought you were just cold, but now I think you were just tired of being the one who always showed up." I nodded. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer absolution. But we stood there, quietly, in something that felt more honest than anything we'd had before. That night I walked home under a slow rain, not even caring that my shoes were soaked. I felt clean. Not perfect, not above anyone, just clean. Like I had scrubbed off a layer of guilt that didn't belong to me. The workshop ended after 8 weeks. Each person left with a workbook, a handwritten note from me, and a resource list I had spent 2 weekends compiling. The mom with 2 jobs cried. The teen with the stutters shook my hand and said, "No one's ever talked to me like I'm smart before." I didn't cry. Not until I got home. Then I sat on the floor of my kitchen with a cup of cold tea and let it all come. The relief, the release, the quiet, aching joy of doing something that mattered and having no one question it, resent it, or twist it into an invoice. A week later, the director of the nonprofit called. "Hey, just wanted to let you know the pilot scored our highest feedback ratings ever. We're thinking of expanding. Would you consider helping us build the full program?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because that old voice crept in. What will they say if I do something big without their blessing? Then I reminded myself they weren't watching anymore. And even if they were, their permission had never been a requirement, just a habit. I took the role. A part-time contract at first, then a full-time position with flexibility. A team of other women, writers, teachers, counselors, many of whom had similar stories of being the one everyone counted on until they stopped counting themselves out. We met every Monday. We built modules, created curriculum, wrote grant applications, designed slides with titles like "Boundaries Are a Budget Too." And I loved every minute of it. Somewhere in the middle of that first year, I moved. Not far, just to a smaller, quieter neighborhood with big trees and better sidewalks. My new apartment had no memories of unpaid debts or slammed phones. Just plants, books, and a view of the city that reminded me I chose this. Not once did anyone from my family ask for my new address. I didn't offer it. Not out of pettiness, but peace. In March, I received a letter. Handwritten, no return address. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Mom. "Dear Mira, I don't know what to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse, so I won't give one. We miss you. I miss you. I've been replaying that night in my head for months. I thought I understood sacrifice, but I see now that I only understood dependence. I don't expect a reply. I just want you to know I see you now, and I hope you're okay. Love, Mom." I read it 3 times. Then I put it in the drawer. I didn't write back. Maybe one day I would. But for now, I didn't need her to understand. I only needed her to finally realize I wasn't waiting anymore. I didn't reread it, didn't analyze the tone, didn't call anyone to ask, "What do you think she meant by 'we miss you?'" Because I already knew.
It meant we miss who you were when you gave everything and asked for nothing. It didn't mean they missed me. Spring turned into summer. Our workshops expanded from a single city branch to 4 across the county. I started mentoring other facilitators, many of them younger, eager, filled with the same questions I used to hide behind polite nods. Is it selfish to want boundaries with family? Am I a bad daughter if I say no? What if I disappoint everyone who believes I'm the strong one? Each time, I'd listen first. Then I'd answer the only way I knew how. It's not your job to be everyone's cushion. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone fall. It always landed differently. Some women cried. Some nodded slowly, like the truth was catching up to them in real time. But one by one, they started letting go, just like I had. In August, we held a community event in a local park. It was part celebration, part outreach. Free meals, pop-up resource booths, financial counseling tents. A small stage where I stood and spoke under a white canopy while toddlers shrieked nearby. Everyone thinks the hard part is the money, I said into the mic. But the hardest part is the story you've been told about yourself. I saw a woman near the front cover her mouth with her hand. She didn't cry, but her eyes widened, like someone had just described a dream she thought was only hers. After my talk, she approached. Her name was Rochelle. 2 kids, divorced, living in a motel for 6 months while working double shifts. You're the first person I've ever heard say that out loud, she said. I didn't say much in return. Sometimes just being seen is enough. That night, I walked the long way home. Past closed coffee shops, mural walls, and windows where families sat eating dinner under warm light. I wasn't sad. I wasn't longing. I was simply outside of it. Not excluded, not cast out, just apart. And that was okay, because somewhere in that in-betweenness, I'd found my own rhythm. 1 week later, I got a call I didn't expect. A reporter from a small local paper had attended our event. She was doing a series on women-led community programs and asked if she could profile me. I almost declined. Not because I didn't want the attention, but because old instincts die hard. The part of me that still whispered, keep your head down, don't make a scene, don't provoke anyone. But then I thought of all the women who told me their shame stories, who were told by relatives they were too much, too selfish, too dramatic when they started drawing lines. And I said yes. The article came out on a Monday morning. The headline read, "She said no and changed everything. How one woman is rewriting the rules of family and finance." It was a thoughtful piece. Honest, kind, detailed enough to share my history without dragging it. The journalist never printed names, never hinted at drama, but the message was clear. I had stopped being the fixer, and I'd started being the founder. 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. Saw the article. Didn't realize that's what you were building. I guess I never asked. -Z. It was Zach. No apology, no explanation, just that. For a moment, I wanted to reply. Not to reconnect, but to say, I'm glad you read it. Instead, I deleted the message. Not in anger, just in certainty. Not every door needed to stay open. Some were better bricked shut. The following month, our board approved the next phase of expansion. We'd been awarded a regional grant to create an online curriculum available to any woman in the country who needed it. I was asked to lead it. There was no hesitation this time. I said yes, with my whole chest, without guilt. Because this wasn't just a job anymore, it was a movement. And I didn't just want to be part of it, I wanted to design the blueprint. When the first digital lesson launched, we had 4,700 signups. Within a week, 12,000. Emails poured in. Messages from Alabama, Arizona, Maine, even someone from the UK. Women saying, "I thought I was the only one. I finally feel less alone. I just told my mom no, and I didn't fall apart." I read every single one. And somewhere in that flood of stories, something cracked open inside me. Not pain, not grief. Pride. For every woman I'd become. For every version I had to outgrow. For every quiet boundary I placed, even when no one understood it. On a cold October night, after a long day of recording audio lessons and troubleshooting platform bugs, I curled into my couch with tea and a blanket and realized I hadn't thought about my family in weeks. Not because I hated them, but because I didn't need them to shape me anymore. The ache had gone. All that remained was a quiet, clear kind of freedom. Not my usual spot, but a cozy place with burnt orange walls, chipped wooden chairs, and the smell of over-roasted beans. I liked it because no one knew me there. It was a place where I could just be a woman with a laptop, not someone people emailed for advice or funding proposals. I was working on a module about emotional labor, how it isn't always visible, but it's always costly, when the door chimed. I didn't look up. The place was always full of freelancers and students. I heard the scrape of chairs, a soft laugh, someone ordering a cappuccino. None of it caught my attention until I heard my name. Not Eliza, Lisa, the version only family ever used. I looked up, and there he was, my father. He hadn't aged dramatically, a few more gray hairs, a stiffness in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. But the face was unmistakable. So was the voice. He stood near the register, holding a coffee, talking to someone I didn't recognize. He hadn't seen me. And I realized he wouldn't. Not like this. Not in my black jeans and oversized cardigan. Not with my hair up and no lipstick. Not behind a laptop in a place he'd never think to find me. To him, I had disappeared. And maybe, in a way, I had. I didn't panic. I didn't shrink. I just watched. And what struck me most wasn't anger or grief. It was detachment. Like watching an old colleague in a city you no longer work in. You remember their name, their quirks, but not enough to interrupt your day. He sat 2 tables away, opened a newspaper, checked his phone, scrolled. I stared at the screen of my laptop, then back at him. I had nothing to say. Not out of pettiness. Not because I was done, but because that conversation, whatever version of it existed in fantasy, had already happened. In my body, in my tears, and the long walk away from the woman they wanted me to be. 10 minutes passed, then 20. He stood, tossed his cup, and left without looking around. Did he recognize me? I'll never know. But I knew one thing. He would have to meet the woman I had become on my terms, not by accident, not when I was mid-sentence on someone else's essay about debt and dignity. That moment, silent, strange, anticlimactic was the closure I never knew I needed because I saw it with my own eyes. He wasn't looking. He never had been. That night, I told my mentor over dinner. I thought I'd feel something, I admitted, but it was like watching a stranger. She nodded slowly. That's what grief does. It doesn't just end, it evolves. One day you realize the person you lost was never who you thought they were. I went home and opened my old lessons folder, the one with the IOUs, the receipts, the records of everything I once gave without keeping score. I didn't shred it, but I added something new. A printout of our workshop's national rollout numbers. 20,000 users, 11 countries, testimonials stacked like prayer flags. I labeled the sheet, "What Came After," because that mattered more. 2 weeks later, I was invited to speak at a leadership conference. It was my biggest stage yet. Hundreds of women in the audience, panelists who ran Fortune 500 companies, spotlights, cameras, branded lanyards. I wore a navy pantsuit, tied my curls back, looked at myself in the mirror, and whispered, "This is real. This is you." My speech wasn't fancy. It was just honest. I talked about being the strong one, about what it cost to never need anything, about how my freedom started with a single, quiet no. Afterwards, dozens of attendees came up. Many had tears in their eyes. One woman whispered, "I've never heard anyone say that out loud. Thank you." I wanted to tell her, I'm just saying what I needed someone to tell me 10 years ago. But I just smiled. Later that evening, after the event, I received another letter. No return address again. But I knew the handwriting. This time, it was short. I saw the article in the paper. I don't recognize this version of you, but I think she's who you were always meant to be. I'm sorry it took me so long. Dad. I didn't cry, but I did breathe a little deeper because this time he wasn't asking for anything. Not money, not explanation, not access, just acknowledgement. It wasn't a door reopening. It was a chapter ending properly. I folded the letter, placed it in the same drawer as the one from Mom, not to forget, but to honor the truth of it all, that I had survived, that I had rebuilt, that I had stopped asking for someone to choose me and chosen myself instead. I didn't reply to the letter. There was nothing left to say. But that didn't mean I hadn't changed, because I had. Not in the loud, cinematic way people expect, not with speeches or revenge or some neat bow of reconciliation. My transformation was quiet, like water reshaping a shoreline, like a door that slowly swings shut until one day you realize it's sealed for good. I still got updates from time to time, not directly, just through social media glimpses or people who still floated in both circles. Zach had moved states. Mom started a flower arrangement side business. Dad joined some local veterans club. They were fine. Their lives kept going, as did mine. And that was the final revelation. They didn't break without me. They adjusted, just as I had. That truth settled over me not with bitterness, but relief. Because for years, I believed I was the thread holding the whole tapestry together, that if I cut myself loose, everything would unravel. But it didn't. They didn't collapse. And neither did I. The nonprofit grew. We hired staff, created satellite programs, got featured in a major online publication that called us one of the most quietly revolutionary community efforts of the decade. I smiled at the word quietly because that was how we'd done everything, from the budgeting workshops to the healing. No fanfare, no vengeance,
just showing up differently and keeping the door open for others to do the same. I started seeing someone too. His name was Kai, a teacher, steady and kind, with a dry wit and zero desire to fix or be fixed. We met at a literacy event. He asked thoughtful questions, didn't flinch when I talked about estrangement, never once said, "But they're still your family." He listened, held space, and never tried to fill the silence. The first time he came over, he noticed the drawer in the corner, the one with the old letters and receipts. "You keep those?" he asked gently. "I do," I said. "They're not chains anymore. They're markers, like notches on a tree you've climbed." He nodded, didn't ask to read them, just wrapped his arms around me and said, "Then let's keep climbing." We didn't rush anything. There were no declarations, no plans for matching bath towels or shared streaming accounts, just dinners, walks, late night talks about everything and nothing. And for once, I wasn't performing. I wasn't editing myself to be more palatable. I wasn't checking my phone to make sure someone else hadn't imploded. I was just living. One evening, I came home to find a small envelope on my doorstep. No name, just a stamp and the initials EC. I opened it carefully. Inside was a card. "I watched your TEDx talk today. I couldn't finish it. Not because it wasn't brilliant, but because it hurt. You deserved better. I'm working on understanding that. Maybe someday we can talk. No pressure. Just hope." From Aaron, my cousin, the one who once called me cold, who borrowed and vanished, who sat in the back of that first workshop and couldn't look me in the eye. I smiled, folded the card, and placed it with the others, not because I needed anything from her, but because hope isn't a contract, it's an offering, and I could accept it, without cost, without reopening the wound, just quietly. A few months later, we launched a new initiative, the Table Project, an open source curriculum for young women who grew up carrying too much too early. Modules on boundaries, self worth, financial autonomy, and how to rebuild when your origin story didn't give you tools, just expectations. It was my proudest work yet, not because it was perfect, but because it was everything I once needed but couldn't find. And now it existed. It was real, just like me. One final story. A year after my father walked into that cafe without noticing me, I visited the park near my childhood home. I hadn't planned to. I was early for a dinner nearby and decided to walk through, out of curiosity more than sentiment. Same cracked path, same bench I once read on as a teen, and then I saw them. Not my parents, but a family. A mother balancing a crying toddler, a father tossing a soccer ball to a boy, a girl, maybe 10, sitting with headphones and sketching. It wasn't the sight that moved me. It was the realization that chapter is no longer mine. I had outgrown it. Not because I was bitter, but because I had built a whole new book, and I liked this one better. I sat on the bench for a few minutes, took out my phone, checked the workshop app, and watched as 3 new users signed in. Somewhere someone was deciding, for the first time, not to be the family fixer, not to save everyone at the cost of themselves, not to rewrite a story that never included their name on the cover. And I whispered, just for me, "Good. Let it begin with you." I left the park, didn't look back, because I didn't need to.